What's up guys, Asian here with another build video, and today we're going to be going over the Stamina Dragonknight DPS. Still one of the most powerful DPS in the game, as well as having a very simple and consistent rotation. Stamina Dragoknights are still very well favored in endgame raid groups, so a lot of the in-game rank guilds you'll see when they are running Stamina will probably have 2 to 3 Stamina DKs in their group. So just like our other build videos, we're going to be going over gear, skill bars, CP point distributions, attribute, race, mundus, all that kind of stuff. Then we'll go over our rotation to kind of talk about what it's going to look like, what kind of skills we want to prioritize over others, and then we'll pop things off with the 6 million dummy parts so you guys can get an idea of what the Stamina Dragonknight is able to pull and what the rotation looks like. So without further ado, let's go ahead and get started. So we're going to start things off with gear. For your monster helm, we are going with Velidreth. Velidreth is still the monster helm of choice for stamina DPS. I do have one heavy piece here, so I am going with 6 medium and 1 heavy for my armor. That's just to give me a little bit of extra health in order to make me a little bit more survivable, because stamina do generally have lower health if you do decide to go with 6 medium. I have all stamina enchants on my armor as well. For our first 5-piece, we are going with Sunderflame. Sunderflame is a medium armor set that comes from City of Ash. It's very good for, synergizes very well, I should say, with the Stamina Dragonknight because of that flame damage, being able to proc, for example, burning. Then you get a little bit of extra damage from that as a Dragonknight. In addition, it procs off of heavy attacks, and we are still doing a heavy attack build as a Stamina Dragonknight, so it synergizes very well with our rotation. Our second 5-piece is going to be Vicious Ophidian. This is a medium armor set that's dropped from any of the Kra'gh trials. We are going with 2 armor pieces and 3 jewelry with Vicious Ophidian, just because we want gold jewelry, and jewelry out of these 2 sets you can only get jewelry from Vicious Ophidian as gold quality. So that's something to keep in mind there. So we are going with the Vicious Ophidian. It just helps out with our sustain with the 5-piece, reducing your cost of our stamina abilities by 8%, as well as the whole Minor Slayer. For your jewelry, we are going with 3 weapon damage glyphs. I am on the PTS, so I don't have gold Vicious Ophidian jewelry, but you would be using gold Vicious Ophidian jewelry here. Because we're going with the heavy attack build, you don't need to use any regen glyphs on your jewelry, so just stick with 3 weapon damage. Now for our weapons, we are going with Sunderflame as our weapons this time, and not Vicious Ophidian. We have an axe on our main hand and a dagger on our offhand. You can swap them wherever you'd like. The important thing is to maintain your traits and your enchants. So on your main hand, you should have nirn with a poison damage enchant, and for your offhand, you should go with infused with a weapon damage enchant. So we are going with Sunderflame now because of the changes to off balance, basically. You can go with Vicious Ophidian on your main hand, on your dual wield bar if you'd like, but you will lose sustain while you're on your back bar. I personally have found a very small difference between using Sunderflame or Vicious Ophidian weapons. I just like going with Vicious Sunderflame now, just because it does give me a little bit better sustain while I'm on a back bar. It does reduce the cost of my bow abilities, which does increase our sustain by a fair amount. So you have some, oh yeah, and for our back bar, we're going with the nirn Maelstrom Bow with a Double Ravage Health poison. So you do have options for your sets here. I would try to stick with Vicious Ophidian if you can, just because it gives you that Minor Slayer boost. It doesn't really matter where it is. I just like to go with jewelry and 2 armor pieces because, again, Vicious Ophidian gold jewelry is fairly easy to come by if you are in vet trials. It drops fairly often. But for Sunderflame, you can replace this with any number of buff or debuff sets. So the other debuff sets that you could possibly be asked to use are going to be Morag Tong, which is a PvP set, or Night Mother's Gaze, which is a crafted set. So if you are going with Night Mother's Gaze, then you absolutely need to use jewelry because you can't craft Night Mother's Gaze jewelry. If you are going with Morag Tong, same thing with Vicious Ophidian. You can go with jewelry if you'd like. It is possible to get gold Morag Tong jewelry, but as far as I know, it's really rare to see them. So I would still stick with Vicious Ophidian jewelry if you can, if you're going to use Morag Tong. Morag Tong, you can buy it off Guild Traders, so don't feel like you have to PvP in order to get it. So those are the 2 other debuff sets that you might be asked to use. If you are a stamina DPS that gets to use a damage set, then you can use something like Hundings instead of Sunderflame. You can also use Briarheart instead. So those are kind of two options there for damage sets for stamina DPS. You would pair that with Vicious Ophidian, and you'd be on your way. There is another set that I want to mention here, and that's going to be Two-Fanged Snake, as well as Spriggans. Those are very selfish sets. They aren't group debuff and buff sets, so you won't really see them too much in trials groups and organized trials groups, but for 4-man dungeons and solo content, I would recommend using Spriggans or Two-Fanged Snake to improve your penetration. But if you are in an organized group with more than one stamina DPS, then you should use one of the debuff sets, Sunderflame or Night Another's Gaze or Morag Tong. Morag Tong, you're only really going to be using if there's 2 or more stamina decays in your group. If there's only 1 stamina decay in your group, then Morag Tong loses a lot of its potential. So you do want to be mindful of how many stamina decays are in your group when you decide to use Morag Tong. For our race, I am a Dark Elf. This is pretty much a carbon copy of my character on live. So I am a Dark Elf, but Dark Elves are not going to be the best option for a Stamina Dragonknight. They're not the worst. They do get 6% additional stamina, and they do get additional damage to flame damage, so it does boost your damage from Sunderflame, but it's so small it doesn't really matter too much. But Dunmer are not a terrible choice when it comes to stamina DPS. Red Guards are going to be the best choice for stamina DPS, followed by Khajiit and then Imperials. Imperials are locked behind the Imperial upgrades, so if you don't have that, you can't use the Imperial. If you don't have the Imperials, then Bosmer are also not a bad choice as well. Bosmer get more stamina regen, but they get lower stamina overall. They only get 6% stamina. Khajiits also have lower stamina overall compared to Red Guards and Imperials, but they do get 8% additional crit. Red Guards and Imperials both get much more stamina than the previous 2 races there. Red Guards also get Adrenaline Rush, which helps out their sustain, which gives them back stamina every time they deal damage, or every 5 seconds when they deal damage with their melee attack. Imperials do get additional health as well, so you don't need to worry as much about putting points into health like I have here. So I have 60 points into stamina, 4 into health, and again, those 4 points into health are to help my survivability. If you feel like you don't need those points, if you feel like you can survive perfectly fine, you can put all your points into stamina if you'd like, but I like to have that additional wiggle room when it comes to health. For our Mundus Stone, we are using the Warrior here, but you can use the Lover. The thing with the Lover is make sure you are not going over the penetration cap of 18,200 with the Lover and all your debuff sets up. So, you know, if you take into account Sunderflame, Night Mother's Gaze, Power of Delight, if you have a Stamplar in group, your Crusher, and your Alkosh, and if you have all those debuffs up, you actually don't need any points into piercing, so you can run the Warrior. But if you are missing 2 or 3 of those debuff sets, then obviously you might want to consider using the Lover. Again, as long as it doesn't put you over the penetration cap, it will win out over the Warrior. And we are using max health, max stamina food here, so this is just plain blue food. Now for our ability bars. Starting off with our front bar, we have Blood Craze. You can use Rending Slashes if you'd like. Blood Craze has a nice heal over time that really helps out your survivability, but Rending Slashes is the stronger morph when it comes to pure DPS. Venomous Claws, Noxious Breath, Deadly Cloak, Rearming Trap, and Flawless Dawnbreaker. We aren't going to be using Flawless Dawnbreaker as our primary ultimate. This is just here for that additional weapon damage boost. And for our back bar, I have Echoing Vigor. You can go with the other morph, Resolving Vigor. My Stam DK doubles as a tank, which is why I have Echoing Vigor here. But Resolving Vigor is going to be a better choice if you're going to be just a pure stamina DPS. You can also use Flames of Oblivion for this slot if you'd like, but do keep in mind that it is a pretty hefty drain on your magicka if you do decide to use Flames of Oblivion, so you're going to have to be mindful of when you use it. Poison Injection, Endless Hail, Razor Caltrops, the staples for any stamina DPS, and then Molten Armaments for that boost to our heavy attacks. And our primary ultimate here is going to be Standard of Might. Now for our CP points, the CP cap is now 720, which gives you 240 points across each of the 3 colors. So for our green CPs, we have 75 into Mooncap and 75 into Tenacity, which leaves 90 points which you can play around with in any of the remaining nodes. This is what I have. I have 31 Shadow Ward, 31 Tumbling, and a 28 Warlord, but like I said, you can kind of play around with how you want to distribute those points into any of the nodes you have. For our blue CPs, so again, you're going to want to keep in mind the debuff set that you have. So this particular setup is optimized for my personal raid group, my 2 raid groups, where we only get infused Torx Crusher. Our tanks do not use Alcast, so that's why I have a couple of points into piercing. So I do recommend picking up constellations and combat metrics. So what you're going to want to do is basically you're going to do a parse. You can be a dummy parse, preferably with raid buffs, or it can be an actual in-raid parse. For example, I like to use Stone Atronach and VAA because that's very much a tank and spank fight there. Or Valarial. Valarial is also pretty much tanking spank. Pretty much save the report, you hit comp metrics import, it imports all of the relevant information. You will need to manually input your weapon penetration, so make sure to put that in. Swap over to the champion points panel, hit calculate, and it'll tell you under this column what your optimal CP point distribution will be for that parse. So ideally, what you want to do is you want to do several parses and get a TP point distribution for all of them, and then figure out from there which distribution that you want to do. So this is the one that works out for my CP and my raid group. 64 into Mighty, 22 into Piercing, 56 into Precise Strike, 61 into Thaumaturge, 20 into Master at Arms, and 9 into Physical Weapon Expert. And finally, for our red CPs, I like to go with the one size fits most kind of setup here, but you, depending on the content you're running, you can redistribute your CPs accordingly. It's kind of up to you how you want to do with that. For example, if you are going to be running VMAW, it might behoove you to put more points into Elemental Defender rather than Hardy, because you will be taking more magic damage compared to physical damage. I had 66 into Ironclad, 1 into Medium Armor Focus, 61 into Thick Skinned, 56 into Hardy and Elemental Defender. I have nothing under the Lord. But you can, in fact, put 10 points into something like Quick Recovery or Bastion. I probably wouldn't put Bastion, probably do Quick Recovery. For the passives here, Field Physician, which decreases the amount of damage you take when you resurrect another player. So it is potentially a good thing to have 10 points in the Quick Recovery just for this passive here. If you want to go even further, you can put 30 points in, but an Infusion passive isn't very strong on Stamina DPS, so it's not quite as necessary. So now with all that out of the way, we're going to go ahead and start talking about our rotation. We're going to move over here to the 3 mil dummy so I can show you guys what we're going to be doing. So all the dots on your back bar, Endless Hail, Razor, Caltrops, Poison Injection, those are all going to be very strong contributors to your DPS. One thing to keep in mind if you are using the Maelstrom Bow is that the Maelstrom Bow effect doesn't actually start until the first tick of damage. So you're always going to want to open with your Endless Hail, because there is a delay between when you cast Endless Hail and when it actually starts to hit. There's a 2-second delay here. So you can see here, it doesn't actually start until Srendar hits 10 seconds out on that 12-second timer. So you have 2 options here for your back bar. You can either swap cancel out of Poison Injection or Caltrops. I prefer to do Caltrops, but you can swap cancel out of Poison Injection if you prefer. For your back bar, because your main ultimate's going to be on your back bar, what you're going to want to do is you're going to want to use your ultimate after you apply all your dots, just so all your dots are running so they're getting that damage boost from the Seraph of Might passive there. And on your front bar here, we're just going to be doing 2 light attacks and 3 heavy attacks. So we're going to open with a light attack into Noxious Breath or Venomous Claws. It kind of depends on what you want to do. I typically go light attack, Noxious Breath, but I've had very good success with light attack, Venomous Claws as well. So basically what you're going to do is you're going to want to do light attack. It's better if I just show you guys. So we're always going to light attack on our back bar. Obviously you're going to want to buff up here, and then you use your ultimate. And then you do 3 heavy attacks. And then you want to light attack, cancel, and then swap cancel out of the animation for Rearming Trap. So light attack, then you heavy weave, 3 heavy attacks, then light Rearming Trap, and then swap cancel out of the animation. Then you're going to want to make sure to re-up Molten Armaments every 20 seconds to get that minor brutality buff. Then light attack. And then you continue to repeat the rotation like so. So you can see here that the rotation is very static for stamina DK, so you won't have to play around with differing timings and things like that. So you will end up overcasting a little bit on the Deadly Cloak as well as Rearming Trap, but you do want to keep those dots up, the Deadly Cloak for the damage mitigation and Rearming Trap for the minor force uptime. So with all that said and done, let's go ahead and do our 6 million W parser. We'll try to narrate throughout, but because it is a static rotation, don't expect too much out of me. Let's go ahead and get started then. So we're doing 3 light attacks. That's 1, 2, 3, and then light attack, swap cancel out of Rearming Trap. If you are using Flames of Oblivion, you would be putting Flames of Oblivion last in your rotation on the back bar. So you'd go Endless Hail, Poison Injection, Caltrops, Flames of Oblivion, and Molten Armaments, or your ultimate if you're using that. So you can see here we're basically re-upping Molten Armaments every other rotation. If you are using Flames of Oblivion, because Flames of Oblivion does require Magicka, and Molten Armaments is fairly expensive when it comes to Magicka, you can see here brings you down to, it takes up 40% of my Magicka, and I am a Dark Elf, so I have additional Magicka for my passives. So do keep that in mind if you do decide to use Flames of Oblivion. You might need to hold off on recasting Molten Armaments for Magicka concerns. We did have a little bit of a lag spike there. So really make sure you're hitting those light attacks on your back bar and your bow bar, because you do want to keep those Hawkeye stacks going for as long as you can. One thing that I also want to make note of is that instead of Standard of Might, you can also use Ballista. It'll give you a little bit better sustain because it's cheaper, but it doesn't do quite as much as Standard of Might does. Get rid of this. So we did have a little bit of a lag spike there in the middle, so our DPS is not quite as high. With this parse, I have pulled 38 before. I think that lag spike there kind of dropped my dots off enough to kind of influence our DPS a little bit. But we see here 36.7, 36.8k. Like I said though, I have pulled 38 on a 6 million dummy with this before. And we can see here our regen versus drain per second. It's pretty I don't know what the adjective form of parity is, but it's pretty even across. You can see we have a little bit more regen than drain. That's to be expected with 3 heavy attacks in our build here. And we can see Endless Hail, Razor, Caltrops, Poison Injection. Like I said, your back bar dots are going to be pretty strong here. So that's pretty much it for this build video. Hope you guys found it informative, and I will see you guys in the next dungeon.